This is a unique story about a brutal crime. The perpetrator initiated a deadly game with detectives, a game in which the police were forced to participate according to the rules of a madman. The prize in this twisted game was someone's life. But what kind of deadly game was it, and who ultimately won? The story begins in Baytown, Texas on October 31st, 1985, Halloween, one of the most beloved holidays for children in the United States. On this day, adults generously hand out candy to children dressed in special Halloween costumes. At 4 p.m., 11-year-old Mary Stiles asked her father, Gary, if she could go to the main office of their apartment complex. Inside the office, in honor of Halloween, there was a fake coffin filled to the brim with candy for the children, and little Mary wanted her share. Without hesitation, Gary said yes. Their residential complex frequently organized such festivities for children. And so, dressed in her pink bear pajama costume, Mary set off in search of fun, pranks, and treats. Dusk fell quickly. The hours passed, yet Mary had not returned. When night finally arrived, an initial sense of unease began to creep into Gary's mind. A dense anxiety that starts deep inside and slowly rises to the throat. Then it invades the mind, filling it with troubling thoughts. I hope nothing bad has happened. When dinner time came and Mary was still missing, Gary realized that waiting any longer was not an option. He set out to look for his daughter. The worried father spoke to the children Mary usually played with. Some of them had seen her at the entrance of the apartment complex, playing with dolls, but no one knew where she had gone after that. As darkness deepened, his slight worry turned into full-blown panic. It became clear to him that continuing to search alone was futile. It was time to report his daughter's disappearance to the police. Baytown police responded swiftly. They knew that when a child goes missing, time is of the essence. Officers obtained Mary's photograph and a description of her Halloween costume, a pink bear pajama. They began retracing her last known steps. Indeed, she had been at the apartment complex office, where she received some candy before leaving. That was the last known sighting of her. With hundreds of apartments in the area, the search effort was massive. Officers went door to door, showing Mary's photo and looking for any leads. A police checkpoint was set up, stopping and checking every car entering and leaving the complex. Yet none of these efforts yielded any results. It was as if Mary had vanished into thin air. Night passed, and by the next morning, the police still had no leads. They pursued the usual investigative routes for such cases, checking on individuals with a history of crimes against children, known offenders, pedophiles, and predators living in the vicinity. But there were still no clues to Mary Stiles' disappearance. On the third day, the police decided to turn to the media. Mary's family made a public appeal on television. "If someone is holding Mary, I urge them to let her go," her father pleaded. After the press conference, the police were inundated with calls and tips. People claimed to have seen Mary in different places across Texas and various cities with different individuals. However, after following up on every single lead, none turned out to be useful. Each one was a dead end. Then, 9 days after Mary's disappearance, a strange letter arrived at the Baytown police station. The oddities began with the envelope itself. It had no return address. Instead, in large, messy handwriting, the words, "Urgent Mary Stiles," were scrawled across it. When officers opened the envelope, they were shocked to find a map inside. Alongside it, a chilling message read, "Here, you will find Mary's body." The crude drawing instructed detectives to head south from the apartment complex toward a wooded area a few hundred meters away. The map was remarkably detailed. It indicated specific locations, with notes such as, "I stabbed her here twice. You will find blood here." The final location marked on the map was under a tree, accompanied by a haunting inscription, "Find her and give her a proper burial." Police immediately set out along the path described in the letter. As expected, they soon found themselves on a trail leading into the forest. After about 10 minutes, they reached a large tree. Nearby, another fallen tree lay on the ground. Beneath a pile of broken branches and leaves, something pink was visible. When officers removed the debris, they found Mary Stiles' body, exactly where the map indicated. The girl's body was curled up in a fetal position. It had been exposed to the elements for over a week, showing significant signs of weather damage. Her pajama costume was slightly disheveled, which raised concerns about possible sexual violence, though it was too soon to confirm without an autopsy. Detectives described the scene as horrific. Some officers who found the body had daughters around the same age, making it impossible not to take the case personally. The detectives now faced the grim task of informing Mary's parents. However, they never got the chance. Gary Stiles learned of his daughter's fate in the most heartbreaking way possible. On the day Mary's body was discovered, Gary was returning from a neighboring town. Stopping at a store along the way, he noticed the cashier taking down a missing poster featuring Mary's face. He asked why the poster was being removed, only to receive a devastating response. "Haven't you heard? They found her body this morning." The next day, a medical examination of Mary's body was conducted. The results were grim. She had been strangled to death. Additionally, she had suffered 4 stab wounds to the neck. Cuts on her hands suggested that she had fiercely fought back, desperately trying to escape her attacker. Unfortunately, she lost that battle. However, there were no signs of sexual assault, making the crime even more baffling. What was the motive? Was it simply a killing for the sake of killing? And why was Mary chosen as the victim? These unsettling questions lingered in the air. At the crime scene, no additional evidence was found, only the letter with the map that police had received from the killer. The letter contained several spelling errors, and the map was crudely drawn. This led detectives to suspect that the murderer was either poorly educated or deliberately trying to appear that way. Another theory emerged: the killer might be mentally unstable. The postmark on the envelope indicated it had been sent from Baytown, the very city where Mary had disappeared. However, there was no sender's address. Crucially, police discovered fingerprints on the letter. Yet, there were no matches in the database, bringing investigators to another dead end. It was likely that the envelope also carried the killer's DNA, but in 1985, DNA technology was not advanced enough to track someone using such evidence. Once again, the case stalled. Then, something unexpected happened. A second letter arrived at the police station. It was written in the same handwriting, inside a similar envelope with no return address. This time, it contained a confession. The writer, calling himself a madman, stated, "Soon, the time will come when the madman lays down his weapon and faces judgment on this earth. The pain is more than I can bear, the pain of memories and of hiding what I have done from myself and those around me." Did the killer truly regret his actions? Was he genuinely tormented by what he had done? Or was he merely an unstable individual wavering between good and evil, someone who could easily kill again? The police had no answers. They sought help from the FBI. At that time, criminal profiling was gaining popularity in the U.S., analyzing a perpetrator's actions to create a psychological profile. The FBI's task was to profile the murderer based on his letters. Meanwhile, local police intensified their hunt for the killer. Back then, they had no idea that they would have to play by his rules, a game where the price would be a human life. A week after Mary Stiles was murdered, the police department received yet another letter from the killer, the third one. The tone of this letter was angry and pompous, but most importantly, it marked the beginning of a twisted game for the police. The killer wrote that he would send riddles to the police, and solving them would eventually lead to his identity. "You will be given 3 trial questions to set you on the right path. The prize for you in this game will be someone's life. The game starts now," the letter stated. The first riddle read, "This time has long passed, but the name remains. The one who weighs the heart against the feather of truth." According to the killer's instructions, the answer had to be printed at the bottom of the front page of the local newspaper, the Baytown Sun. Time was against the police, forcing them into a deadly game with a dangerous criminal. This was serious, deadly serious. If they got the answer wrong, someone could die, just like little Mary Stiles. The police concluded that the question referred to ancient Egyptian mythology, specifically the judgment of the soul. In ancient Egypt, it was believed that the more good deeds a person performed in life, the lighter their heart became. After death, the heart was weighed against the feather from the headdress of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice. If the heart was heavy with wrongdoing, it would be devoured by the soul eater, condemning the person to oblivion. If the heart was light, the person was allowed into the afterlife. The one who performed the weighing was Anubis. The police concluded that Anubis was the correct answer and published it in the December 6, 1985, edition of the Baytown Sun, making sure it was visible to the killer. Shortly after, another letter arrived. The detectives eagerly opened it, only to find that the killer was displeased. The police had gotten the answer wrong. "It is not Anubis. I forgive you. Try again. But next time, I will not. Get it right, or someone will die." Detective Paul Schaefer spent hours in the local library searching for the correct answer. He discovered that while Anubis initially performed the weighing, he was later replaced by another god, Osiris. The detectives concluded that Osiris was the answer the killer wanted. In the next edition of the Baytown Sun, the name Osiris appeared at the bottom of the front page. Two things happened afterward. First, no one was killed. Second, the police received a new letter with a second riddle. "He is the god of the depths and darkness, the ruler of all that moves with a whistle. In the beginning there was no land, only a place governed by his hand. The Romans worshipped him daily, especially when traveling far." Once again, the police had only until the next newspaper issue to solve it. They deduced that the answer was the Roman god of the sea, Neptune. As before, they printed the answer in the newspaper, and it appeared to be correct. While local police focused on solving the deadly riddles to ensure their community's safety, FBI profilers completed the suspect's profile. Their main conclusions were the killer lived or worked near the victim. The killer knew the victim. The killer was local and likely resided in the same apartment complex as Mary Stiles. The letters were probably mailed from a nearby mailbox. The most shocking discovery, the killer was a child himself. According to the FBI, the murderer of 11-year-old Mary Stiles was just 15 or 16 years old. Even seasoned officers found it hard to believe. Since the FBI suspected that the letters were sent from a mailbox in Mary Stiles' residential complex, they set up surveillance. The police waited and watched until, eventually, a possible suspect appeared. A young boy on a bicycle, wearing an oversized black leather jacket. He suspiciously approached the mailbox and dropped a letter inside. As soon as he left, Baytown police acted quickly. With help from a U.S. Postal Service worker, they retrieved the envelope and confirmed that the handwriting matched the previous letters. An undercover officer followed the boy and discovered that he lived in the same apartment complex as the Stiles family. The police opened the letter, and its style and handwriting were strikingly similar to those of the previous messages. The next day, the police continued their surveillance. At one point, the suspect stepped outside to take out the trash. When he left, the police retrieved the garbage bag and found numerous drafts of letters similar to those received by the department. It was unthinkable. The notorious murderer, whom the police had feared for weeks, turned out to be a 16-year-old boy, Joseph Fordham. He lived with his mother, stepfather, and stepsister. His stepsister, who was 10 years old, had been Mary Stiles' best friend. Mary had frequently visited the Fordhams' home. That's how Joseph knew her. The next step was searching his school locker and bedroom. Inside his locker, they found several books on mythology, one of which was bookmarked on a page about Osiris. In his room, they found belongings of Mary Stiles. With enough evidence, the police arrested Fordham. During interrogation, he immediately confessed. He showed no remorse and gave no clear reason for his actions. Even experienced officers couldn't comprehend the reality of the situation. A child had brutally taken the life of another child. Joseph Fordham was 16 years old. Since he was a minor, he would have been released at 18 under Texas law, serving only 2 years. The prosecutor couldn't allow that. Due to the severity of the crime, Fordham was tried as an adult. His defense attempted to argue that he was mentally ill. Indeed, a year before the murder in 1984, Fordham had been admitted to a psychiatric hospital and diagnosed with manic depression. His motive remained unclear. Perhaps he initially intended something else but panicked, or maybe there was another reason entirely. Fordham himself couldn't explain it. The jury found Joseph Fordham guilty of murder with aggravating circumstances. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Justice, however, was short-lived. In a shocking twist, Fordham was granted early release in 1994, serving only 8 years. Today, Joseph Lee Fordham is a free man. He is now 54 years old.